Hi, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I am very excited today. But I've got a very special guest. Before we talk to her, though, I wanted to remind everyone to like this video, share it out wherever you're coming from. I'm on multiple platforms, so share it out from wherever. I really appreciate it. And today, I've got a very special guest. It's someone that I've actually gotten to know recently. We're both kind of culture commentators, and she writes for Town Hall. I, of course, write on StudioJakeMedia.com and Live Action News. But I'm very excited to have Rebecca Downs with me today. She also goes by Rebecca Rose as an author. That's her pen name. We're going to be talking about her books and so much more. So, Rebecca, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
So, to start off, you just released a sequel. This is the first book in your series,
Yes,
Love, Politics, and Survival. So, if someone is unfamiliar with your work, kind of go into what the story is about, and where it's going to go next, without too much
sure,
spoilers, obviously.
sure. So the first book came out in March 2020 and deals with the Whitfield family, which is a family that's kind of immersed in politics in the fictional country of Waldovia. And there's a lot of political corruption, which is really exemplified when there's an attempted coup, and how the family is affected by that, especially because um, George Whitfield, the main character, is working for the government kind of like in a forced position, but his son actually helped with the coup. So
Mhm.
you're like, oh boy, how do they navigate that one? So it kind of goes into the family dynamics of that, over politics, but also kind of love triangles and just how difficult and complex family can be. And then the second one came out in November, and that one is, it kind of deals with the fallout of the first book. Some like major stuff happened, and it deals with how the Whitfield family, um there's George Whitfield, but also his wife Maria Whitfield, his daughters Cassandra and Amelia, and his son Danny, who's the one who's involved in the coup, his brother Gregory Whitfield. And then, funny story, there's Adam Mayer, who I thought of this book when I was 14 years old. And my husband's name is Adam, but I didn't want to change the name, so it remains Adam. It's not after my husband. I thought of this book idea several years ago. And then it's also how they're forced to reckon with the villain. Now, this guy is a really big villain. Let me tell you, Edward Roth. He's one also involved in politics in the country. So it's a lot of, it's not, even if you don't like politics, it's not like a political science book. It's more about family drama and family saga and kind of and dealing with that.
And it's really cool, and it kind of reminded me of, because everyone knows I read light novels, and I really felt like obviously it has a little bit higher word count than a light novel, which is a
Yes,
Japanese version of a novella. It's a full-on novel, but I
it
really
is.
felt
It's
like
fun.
it was written like in that sort of light novel fashion, where there's these twists and turns, and every chapter I felt brought you in to the next phase very fluidly. I felt like it flows together very, very well. And it's so funny because I was thinking about George Whitfield, and you may have a totally different person in mind, but while I was reading him in the first book, I was picturing John Voight playing the
Interesting.
playing the
Okay.
character. So I'm curious, is that kind of how you
I
thought of
had
him in your head?
Okay, I had a very specific, I had Ray Fiennes,
Oh,
who
okay.
just so happens to be my favorite actor.
There you
So
go.
that kind of coincided with that. And then also Ray Fiennes has a brother, Joseph Fiennes. So, maybe if there is a mini series someday, they could each play, those roles.
That's really cool. And tell me a little bit about some of your inspirations. Who do you like to read and whatnot?
Sure. So I love Tasha Alexander. She does the Lady Emily series. It's got mystery, it's got romance in kind of Victorian era England. I also love political commentary. Greg Gutfeld on Fox News. He's got the Gutfeld, the now it's called Gutfeld.
Mhm.
He's done a bunch of shows. His books are laugh out loud funny.
Oh
I
yeah,
I
Gutfeld
love.
monologues. The Gutfeld monologues.
Oh,
I love it. Yeah.
that was a fun one. I didn't think I was gonna like it because I was like, it's just a rehashing, but it was so it was good insight and good kind of like, here's where we were, here's where we actually are.
Mm.
Um, my friend Paige Etheridge, that is both her name and the name she goes by. She wrote one of my favorite books, and I'm not saying that just because she's my best friend, but she wrote this book, Kissing Stars Over the Rising Sun,
Mm.
that is about the Pan women in Japan. So after World War II, they were like, they kind of were like high class prostitutes, but they were like not prostitutes as we think of them now. They were kind of like, I guess like escorts would be a more like appropriate term, but it was like it's a fascinating glimpse into the life of one of the Pan.
Mm.
So that book is Kissing Stars Over the Rising Sun. She's written also like kind of cyberpunk. She's written Pink Dolphin books, like kind of like fantasy. So she
Mm.
is, she's my friend, but she's also my inspiration too.
Well, that kind of flows into what I wanted to talk about next is
Sure.
I feel like um, conservatives specifically, I've actually heard a prominent conservative person say this, and I'm not going to say who it is,
Sure.
but they said that the problem with conservative fiction is there is no conservative fiction, and I kind of interrupted him. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Oh, well, all those Amish romances." And I said, "Okay, well, that's Christian fiction, which I
Yeah.
think there is a distinction between conservative fiction and Christian fiction." And I said, "But what about Andrew Clavin? What about Ayn Rand?" Of course, I know she was more libertarian, obviously, but I
Yeah.
mean, still more right leaning. And I went through this
Yeah.
whole. Even Newt Gingrich writes fiction,
That's true.
and so
Yeah.
so why do you think that there is sort of this, even in conservative circles, there is this sort of idea that conservative fiction doesn't really exist?
Because I think people make assumptions. I think the Amish romances is an assumption, and that also goes to show people make assumptions lumping in Christians and conservatives together, which sure there's overlap, but not always. Um, and it just, I think it's from a point of I don't know this person, but who you mentioned, but so I don't want to speak too poorly of that person. But it's almost like I feel like a sense of ignorance and laziness.
Mhm.
I honestly feel like that's more of an argument we hear from the left.
Yeah.
So I think that's, I hope you put that person in their place, because it's like, oh, but also the thing about fiction, though, if I may, is that it shouldn't matter the politics of the fiction author.
Right.
How do we know that so and so is not conservative? We might think
Good
about,
point.
like, oh, that author, oh, well, did you know they voted for Trump, or, Romney or McCain or whatever? Oh, no, I didn't. See, you didn't know that. So I think I want anybody and everybody to read my books. I don't hide that I'm a conservative, because I can't. I don't see a need to, but also like I'm too like, jammed up talking about you see me, we interact on Twitter all the time. Like I like talking about politics, but if a liberal person, and I have a lot of liberal friends and family members, they didn't factor into that when reading my book,
Hmm.
you know? So I don't think it should matter. Is
I
another way of
absolutely agree.
looking at it.
I absolutely agree with that assessment. I one of my favorite writers is Jonathan Kellerman, and as far as I don't even know his politics. I don't need
Exactly.
to know his politics. I just like it. He writes the Alex Delaware mysteries, and I love those books.
Oh,
And I don't need to know what who he votes for. And it's kind of funny because there's this big discussion of Tolkien with Amazon producing a Lord of the Rings,
that's
Power of
right.
the Ring. I think that's what it's called, Power of the Ring TV series.
Mhm.
And because the Tolkien Society, which is one of his big fan organizations, I guess you could say, they're trying to rewrite history and saying Tolkien was actually a woke person, and Tolkien didn't know what woke was. That is an
Of course.
invention of millennials and Gen Z. And so I was going
Yeah.
to ask, what do you think about this, where we're trying to go back retroactively and rewrite some of these authors in a modern context?
It's dangerous. I think like I've written about it in the past and past jobs too, how it happens from a historical level. because when I wrote for Red Alert Politics, which is now just they put into part of Washington Examiner, that was back in 2015, 2016, it's like a rewriting of history, literally. Culturally, I don't think it has the same ramifications, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have ramifications because,
Right.
but you know, in a way, when you do like it, authors like Tolkien who are part of history because he was an author, that kind of that could be rewriting history. And I'd hope, you know, I could just imagine someone rolling in their grave, you know, because they're not there to defend themselves. You know, the dead can't defend themselves.
Yeah,
Um,
and Christopher Tolkien, who was Tolkien's son, he really protected his dad's legacy. And you
yeah,
know, anytime he saw a script he didn't like, he threw it in the garbage. And
right.
yeah, I know he was
Yeah.
a great keeper of his father's legacy. And I think you know, you know, to go to my audience, you know, that I have behind me, we're seeing that happen with kind of our modern myths with Batman and Superman, where they're
Oh
rewriting
yeah.
them. And this is I wrote about this last year where I said conservatives need to stop ignoring pop culture. It's here to stay. And
Yeah.
I feel like with more stuff that is on the foundational cultures like Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Chesterton, but we're also seeing it in modern times, and that's why I think it is so important for writers like you and me to step up if we have an idea. Now, if you're bad at it, don't do it. But if you have an idea for a story, take a chance, write
Of
a story.
course.
What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I don't think you should let it impede you. I don't think
Right.
you should, it definitely should not impede you. Maybe I don't want to say you can't do both, that you can't be like a political person and a fiction author. I would say kind of, you know, choose something that's going to be your livelihood. Like
Mhm.
political writing is my livelihood,
Right.
you know. Um and I want people to read my town hall articles as I want them to read my novel, you know? So I'm not gonna, I mean, I also go by a pen name, but it's not that hard to, you know, make the connection. Um,
Obviously, right?
yeah, yeah. Um, but I just don't, you know, don't for that. I think it should be more so a matter of not being burned out or having enough time. Do not make it a matter of like, oh, I'm afraid of culture because that makes me sad, you know?
And to be fair to some people, there are you know we see my former employers Daily Wire, they're producing films, right? And we have Dinesh
Yeah.
D'Souza who's making documentaries. But you know, I know that's more film, but you know, like Andrew Clavin writes books, right? And even before I met Andrew Clavin, I was a fan of his books, and
Oh, that's awesome.
up until a certain time period, I didn't even know Andrew Clavin was a conservative. And you know, when I found out, I was like, "Oh, this is
Oh, that's
exciting."
even better. Yeah.
Exactly, that's even better. And so, you know, Andrew Clavin, no ease, as he likes to say. And I feel like there's more like the you know C.S. Johnson who did The Peacock and the Princess, one of my favorite books. And I think that with there needs to be within the conservative movement, they need to notice these folks who are doing this. And not all of
That's
them are going to
true.
be good, but we need to acknowledge the ones that are good. What do you
That's
think?
yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it as a form of encouragement.
Right.
So what I did was when I was telling people about my first book, I was really encouraging them. If you have an idea, go for it. Apply to like a publisher or try to get an agent or self-publish. I have my thoughts on self-publishing, but that's another story. But like go for it. Definitely go for it. And then it's like, yeah, people already know I'm a conservative,
Hmm.
you know? So, but just really I really want to encourage people to go for it and not be afraid. And if they want to use their fiction book to be like, okay, I'm going to make my fiction book about how I'm a conservative, okay, well that's their decision. Maybe some liberal people who would um you know, they have to decide if they're losing out on like a liberal reader or
Hmm.
whatnot then, but that's it's all about make your decision. Don't shy away from it.
And what are some mistakes you feel that conservatives who want to get into writing novels and stuff, what do you think they must? Because for me, I feel like if they go into it with the intention of changing a political landscape, then it's going to be bad. For me, the intention is I write books because I like to write,
Me
and
too.
yeah, exactly. And so I'm curious, what are some mistakes that you think some conservative authors make when they want to get into publishing?
High expectations,
Mhm.
or low expectations. You know, one way
There's a
or the
middle
other.
ground. There's always a happy middle ground, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Don't let it define them.
Hmm. Yeah,
Don't let their politics define them.
exactly. And now I want to change gears just a
Sure.
little bit because this goes into being a creative. And one of the things that we saw is the non-specified virus that no one knows about on YouTube. Apparently, there's a I felt like during that year that these past 2 years is we had an unprecedented opportunity with studios being forced to close down productions. We saw Disney had kind of a small dip.
Oh yeah.
We saw CBS have a dip. All these major film studios and television studios had these big dips. And so I was on Twitter and I was saying, conservatives, this is your chance. Buy into their stocks, become a stockholder, and that way
Oh.
you can influence the product. So if you don't want woke Iron Man, you have a say, and they have a financial incentive to listen to you because you're a stockholder. We did see some of that when the whole Gina Carano thing happened,
Mm-hmm.
where stockholders were complaining at their quarterly meeting. And but I felt like conservatives completely missed the opportunity. Studios are back, stocks are back up, and they're back to being expensive. And I'm curious, am I wrong about that? Because I really feel like conservatives all the time say we want to influence Hollywood, and here was the perfect opportunity to exert some influence, and they failed. What do you think?
Honestly, I don't know if people thought about it that way. I wish they did because that's such a good way of thinking about it. Because I think conservatives might try to go for like the boycott or whatever from a financial
Mhm.
perspective. It's like if you patronize or watch whatever you want. Like when I do a personal boycott, I make it personal. I don't, demand everybody else do it.
Yeah, same, right,
Yeah, so I think they were looking at it maybe from that way, like boycotting versus trying to have an influence because I think it's like being too afraid to do
right,
something. What's the you don't you won't know unless you try,
right.
So I think people were just too afraid. I think wow, I didn't even like think about it
And
that way.
I know that was something that really frustrated me because I was going, I was expecting, because I follow a lot of prominent, wealthy, shall we say, conservatives who could afford to jump on the bandwagon and be like, hey, I just became an investor in CBS. You're going to see changes in Star Trek because you've seen CBS, Viacom,
Everything.
they've totally destroyed the branding. Disney lost all their goodwill with their fans, and it's just starting to trickle back with Boba Fett, our Book of Boba Fett. And I really feel like there there were these all these missed opportunities. And even with, you see DeSouza Media, you see Daily Wire putting out films, you see the Underreported Society doing My Son Hunter. But I also feel like when conservatives produce content, conservative commentators are harder on them than they are on Hollywood. Am I crazy, or do you agree with that assessment?
No, that makes sense. I think people are afraid.
Hmm.
They shouldn't be afraid, but I think that's the issue. And it's like, okay, you know, grow up then, you know.
Yeah,
Conservatives shouldn't be afraid. Like liberals are not afraid.
right.
They are not afraid. And we shouldn't be either.
Yes,
I mean, cancel culture is coming for everybody, but you know what? It's the good thing about good thing is that the way in which it's been exposed and people are standing up for each other more and finding alternate platforms.
And I see that as well. I'm on several alternate platforms. I'm on the alternate platforms. I'm still kind of angry at Getter because they won't verify me, even though I'm verified pretty much everywhere else. But other than that, I'm pretty much satisfied. I actually think, as far as social media platforms, and maybe you can share your thoughts on this as well. I think sort of these first stage ones are aren't going to be the big thing that cracks big tech, but I think maybe the second generation of alternative social media
Mm,
is what's going to crack, because I feel like just right now, like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, TikTok, even, they're just so ingrained. So I think it's going to
and
take
they're
a
so
second
big.
generation to crack it open. What do you
Yeah.
think?
So with that's why I don't like the argument of go start your own social media platform or your own crowdfunding source, because it takes time and money and influence and patience. That's something Donald Trump can do. Somebody's got to do it, but the average everyday person, it's not that easy for them. And
Right.
then when it comes to how big the platforms are, I use Facebook and Twitter. I love it. When I use it, I have to keep in mind that I'm working with liberal overlords, but that's where the people are. That's where you have to go to reach the people.
Right. And I totally agree with that. And Rebecca, final word, where can people find your commentary and your books?
Thank you. So I am on Town Hall as Rebecca. My byline is Rebecca Downs. I am also on Twitter. I just got verified in December. Exciting stuff. My pen name is Rebecca Rose. It is under Solstice Publishing, so it's under their website as well. And on Tuesday night, I just did a Reading, Writing, and Ralph through Zebra Publishing about the second book. So I will be posting the video for my first book, which was September 2020, and also for the second book for people who want to kind of catch up on both.
Nice. And I will post a link to her Amazon author page in the description of this video. So that way
Thank
people can
you.
also find those as well. And Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. This was great. I'm so glad. It was great to finally meet you after interacting on Twitter.
Yes, absolutely. And everyone else, of course, all the links are in my stuff are in the description. You can find my books at booklocker.com. I've got and Cacophony is on Amazon, so you can get that one over there. And everyone else, I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the like button, leave me a comment below, share this video out, and I would really appreciate it if you chose today to become a subscriber to Studio Jake. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on all my socials that are in the description of this video, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.